on creativity at the Rosette. There's so much to learn from artists who've changed the world. And here at the Rosette, when the stage isn't ringing with music, I like to sit down with inspiring guests to explore one secret they've learned, living a life in creativity. I'm Matt Hinsley, and today I'm talking about the creative process with cinematic icon Robert Rodriguez. Robert, thank you so much for joining me here at the Rosette. It is amazing to see you. It's an honor to have you here.
It's great to be here in the chair after Pepe Romero was the first one.
He was indeed. You know, we've spent some time together and you have just inspired me in so many ways. One of those ways has been in conversations about creativity.
My favorite
and the
subject.
Creative process.
Yeah.
Is it really? Well, one of mine as well.
That's all I live for, day and night, yeah.
Well, I'm so excited to take some of those lessons, maybe learn a few more and share them with
yeah, because we all, move through the world differently, and everyone has a different relationship with creativity. And I found I want to be married to this. I want to spend every moment with this, and it really changed my life in a big way. But we'll get to that.
We will. I remember we were in your house one time, and there was a sound that was happening there in the background.
My thunder water.
What's it called?
Thunder water. I call it
thunder water. Wow. Can you just tell us about the thunder water?
Well, they have stuff now, like apps and things that you can create, like waterfall sounds, or there's lots of things people put to help tranquilize you, put you in a meditative state, or help you sleep. They didn't back in the day. Back in the day, ever since I was a kid, I would need like a fan on, or like a humidifier, even if it wasn't time for a humidifier. My room would be so swampy because I always had a humidifier on because it made a certain sound. Had a deep rumble to it, and it had a high end. It kind of was a complete white noise because it masked out low end and high end. People talking, trucks going by, whatever. And instead of a quiet room, which you can almost hear the lights buzzing, it would be very distracting to me. So I liked a sound that would kind of make everything go away. So I created something with 40 different audio tracks on my edit machine one day. This was probably 2008. And it was, rain, thunder and lightning, waves, subterranean sounds, scuba, from the highest to the lowest. And I started playing 30-minute loops of that, just a loop of that in my house every night. And everyone would sleep like babies. My kids have it on their phones, and no matter where they go. If you're in a different hotel room, you sound like you're at home. And it just puts you out. Sounds like you're in the womb, basically. Wow. It just blocks everything out. And then I started to realize during the day, it's too quiet during the day, and I'm trying to work. I would have it on during the day. So it's been playing every night and day since 2009 now.
Incredible.
I've never turned it off.
You never
when people come in, they hear it and they go, what's that? I go, that's one piece to a creative life I've built around myself, which I'll tell you about. I take them piece by piece to show what works best for you being creative and how can you get into that zone, immediately.
Yeah, I just love it so much.
I sleep with that and I wake up with that. So I get that 24/7.
And it's just one facet that keeps you, allows you to be in that space. And that's so interesting. We were in a high school classroom. We were working on a Spy Kids music project with a guitar orchestra. Wonderful group of students, and you took some questions at the end.
Right.
And one young man raised his hand and asked about screenwriting. He said, "I want to be a screenwriter someday. I'm thinking about going to school for screenwriting or creative writing. And do you have any advice for me?" And the advice, as I remember it, that came from you began with "Don't wait." Can you talk a little bit about what that means to you, or why you would have told that to that guy?
It was just something I've always had as part of me. And it was funny. I wrote a book called Rebel Without a Crew on the making of mariachi back in my early 20s. And years later, people would come quote me that sort of thing where I would say, don't wait. You want to be a screenwriter? Stop aspiring to be something, or you'll always be aspiring. You have to change your identity. You have to say, I am a screenwriter, or I am a filmmaker, or I am a musician. Because then if you have that identity, then your behavior has to conform to your identity. You'll start doing those things. Otherwise, you'll never do it. So just what you call yourself, it's already so important. And so the words you use have a lot of power. And so if you're like, I'm not there yet, and it's got a while to go, but I want to get there, that's going to be your lot in life. So I always tell people, don't wait to be ready. Wow. So I've had people even hear this say, when someone told me I had written that in the book, I was like, I was really smart back then. I got to follow my own advice because you forget, so that's why it's good to remind ourselves with these talks about the things we've already learned and sometimes we forget.
I think there's also a system that through a scholastic system, a lot of times there's a sense that you aren't ready until you get the degree 3 years from now or 4 years from now,
Right.
or then you can start thinking professional thoughts.
Right.
And I have to, thinking back to my own days in music conservatory, the greatest musicians that I went to school with then, who are now, however many years later, changing the world with their music, they were already pros.
Right.
They were
right.
doing it in undergraduate school. They were
Wow.
flying around. They were making magic. They were having big thoughts.
Right.
They weren't waiting.
Weren't waiting for it to happen.
But I think there are systems even around us sometimes that can erode our sense that we are ready.
Yeah, going down this road, I would have so much evidence that we already know these things and that we're only waiting to give ourselves permission to know it, to do it. But we've already got the facility because it's not us doing it. It's coming through us. That's my other philosophy. So when you stand in your own way, you close the pipe. You're a conduit. You're a pipe. The spirit, I call them the creative spirits because I feel them. The creative spirit that comes through you doesn't have hands. So, but unless you pick up the pen or pick up the guitar,
Wow.
it can't come through. And then after a while, it feels like it's playing itself. And I hear that in every discipline, music, acting. It's because they're letting their body be the instrument. But if you think it's you, if you go, wow, I don't know what I did and I don't know if I can do it again, you just shut the pipe down. You just close it down with your ego by putting your ego in front of it.
Whoa.
So you've got to get to a place where you just go, I just have to be a pipe, a conduit. I have to just show up. I have to pick up the pen because it doesn't have hands and then just start writing. And sure enough, that was always the method. From my first daily cartoon strip, I started at 19. I realized that was the method. I kept thinking, I have to sit there and draw for hours before I'd come up with something. Then it's got to be an easier way. I'm going to try this other method where I come back home, sit in my easy chair, and just try to visualize the whole thing. And then once I got it visualized, then go draw it. Never worked. Again, it's not going to come through you unless you get up and go actually pick up the pen. As soon as I'd pick up the pen, like I'd have like 30 minutes left before my deadline. I'd finally go, okay, that minute's not working. I'd start drawing this drawing, that drawing, that drawing, and be, this kind of drawing kind of goes with that. That could be part 1. This could be part 3.
Wow.
And then it comes together. That's the method. You have to do it.
Wow.
And when I tell people about this, sometimes I have one person say, wow, when you say it like that, I actually have a project where most of the pieces pretty much there. I guess I could start, but I don't know if I'm ready. I went, it's going to be on your tombstone. Here lies blah, blah, blah. He was never ready.
Wow.
You can't wait to be ready because guess what? You'll be waiting forever because guess what? We're never ready. We're not ready in life or in art. And they should be the same. When you get up in the morning, you don't know your car's going to have a flat tire. You didn't know you just got fired that day. You roll with the punches though. You're not ready for any of that. You're not ready for the fires that horribly just went on in LA. Life comes at you like this and you're like that. But for art, for some reason, people think they got to be ready first. And it's like, that has no relation. Life and art should be very similar. You just jump in because guess what? It's not till you're all the way almost through with a project that you'll finally feel ready because a lot of the answers you need aren't going to come to you till you're actually doing it because then you've already picked up the pen or the camera or the guitar and you've got this other thing working through you. And that's the goal, is to just always be doing something. Ready or not, here you come. It's a discipline. Don't wait for motivation. You have to get up and just do it every day and do it. So that's why I've kind of developed a way to just always being creative so that I don't have to even compartmentalize it to some hours in the day.
Extraordinary. I write. As a writer, I have had this lesson taught to me so many times, but I'm still learning it. It's amazing how it seeps away from me, but
I'm amazed how much you write with as much as you got going on. So I think you're doing really well.
Well,
because it's like, I thought you were going to bring me one book. You brought me like 10 books. Like, where do you, I'm going to find out your secret. How do you get in all that?
Well, I'll just share that I think it's the same secret.
Right.
It's, because there's that moment before you start writing. There's the moment before I start writing where sometimes I start thinking about it and the thinking brain gets going.
Right.
And I think, well, what am I going to write? And is it going to be any good? And, or maybe I should sit in my easy chair and think about, you know, all of the parts of it that are going to be. And then I get worried about it. sort of little fear creeps in about whether or not anybody's going to like it or if it's, and then once I'm through all that and I'm actually beginning to write, there comes a moment when I'm in flow and it's almost like I was dreaming. I wake up and some period of time has passed and something has been written.
Right.
And the remarkable thing is how it's almost never what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, it kind of takes on a life of its own.
Totally. I'm surprised every time.
Yep.
And there's a little bit of guiding. I mean, I know I was writing chapter 3 and it was indeed chapter 3.
Yeah.
But beyond that, it's a mystery.
Well, I could just hearing your process, I could see where it was. First you were thinking about it, you were trying to visualize it. But then when you picked up the pen, that's when a flow started.
Yes.
Because the creative spirit, imagine how frustrated they are. If they're assigned to somebody who is just like, well, I know I should get up and write that book, but I just don't feel motivated. They're like, oh, just go pick up the pen. It's not going to be you anyway. It's going to be me. So if you take ego out of it, then you'll just go sit down and start writing. That's going to happen. It's going to happen. And I know that because I tried it on children. I tried it on my kids.
Really?
Yeah. I just had that theory and I thought, I'm always giving these talks to people. I'm going to go try it with my kids because they have a kind of a school system to let me just go in there anyway. But I'm going to videotape myself when I tell them this creative story because new stuff always comes out. Again, even when you go with the intention to teach people, aren't you surprised sometimes by the things that come out of your mouth? Again,
100%.
You've opened up the conduit. It's not you talking. It needs you to do the talking to them, but the words that come out are like, wow, I should go do that myself.
That's a really good idea.
I'm going to write that down. I knew that would happen. So I went ahead and taped it. And I started telling them about this idea of creativity is just a conduit. I want you all to write. I want you all to help me write a sequel to Shark Boy and Lava Girl. But I know you're not into that anymore because you're older. You're into knights and you're into ninjas. So you're going to write about knights and you're going to write about ninjas. And then we're going to transfer that later to Shark Boy and Lava Girl. She'll be the knight. He'll be the ninja. But for now, write your interests. And all you have to do is pick up the pen. It's just going to start coming out. They go, oh, is that all we have to do? I go, yeah. It's something else comes through you when you do that. So they don't have any lessons to unlearn.
Absolutely.
They don't have any bad habits yet when they were younger. They were like in their early teens. And I said, so I'll give you 3 exercises. 1, write about your character's personal life, then his professional life, and then his secret life. And just write that. So each one wrote. I came back the next time and Racer had written this whole thing about being a knight. A knight isn't his job. He is that day and night. He's a beacon. It's like, you could tell it didn't all come from him. It was like, wow, that's amazing. But then when it got to the secret life, he drew the knight saying, no, I can't tell you that's a secret. I go, no, now you have to tell me about the secret life. I want to know what his secret is because maybe he's in a wheelchair. Maybe he isn't. You're making him sound like Superman right now. Maybe he's got something in his secret life that makes him really interesting. The next time I came back, and then Rebel, really small cribbed writing. Like he didn't write hardly anything. And I could say, okay, you're being stuck by format. You're thinking it has to be perfect sentences, and that's not how you work. Me either. You need to free associate. Just put a paper down and just write random ideas down.
Wow.
Anything that pops in your head, and then you'll see how they go together, and then you can put it down. Because that's how mine's like that, scrambled eggs. It's not going to come out perfect like that. And I showed him an example. Say, okay, you guys are knights and ninjas. I'm a zombie hunter. I'm going to go, here's what I think is a zombie. I started writing some characteristics and I was like, whoa, this is actually really good. I want to go write this now. Next time I came back, Racer had written a 15-page story and he just recited it to me. Like he had the page. He was so excited. Full story. Like,
wow.
Amazing. Like it just came. He said it was just writing itself. Then Rebel got up and he was the younger brother. And he looked really nervous and his eyes were big and his mouth was opening. And I audio taped him because I videotaped Racer stuff. I was going to transcribe them into books. His mouth just kept going and his eyes are going. He gave this great story. And I said, wow, that's a great story. He goes, 90% of that I just came up with right now. Because when I saw how much Racer had written, I was like,
I had to measure up.
And I said, you had no choice but to open the pipe and let it out.
Let it go.
And that's why sometimes people do their best work at the last minute because they get out. Finally they have to just get out of their own way. And they open up the door and now creative spirit can roll up its sleeves and come through you. Because I started developing this theory about 24 years ago. I was doing Spy Kids 2. And that was the first movie where I was everything. I was the production designer. I was the costume designer. I was the cinematographer. I was the composer. And I'm like jumping, and the editor, and I was doing all the jobs like mariachi, but it was a big movie. And I was going, how am I even writing music for orchestra when I don't even know how to read or write music? How am I editing when I've never how am I doing cinematography when I've never taken a lesson in that? There must be something that links them all together. So I ordered on Amazon any book that I could find that had the word creativity in it and just ordered them. I didn't know what department they came from. And I just started reading through them. And one of them was like, oh, wow, this one's really speaking to me, really speaking to me. But then I saw gels and mediums. I went, oh, this is a book particularly about painting, but it translates to all the other jobs I'm doing. And that's when I developed this theory that I think the reason I can go from job to job is because 90% of any creative job is creative. 10% of it is the technical part. Like, think about it, music, even the technical part of reading and writing music and knowing theories, 10% really, how you are creative with that is mostly it. Same with painting, same with writing, same with music. You know, ask Jimmy Vaughn, hey, how do you do that great solo? He goes, you know, it's kind of like tuning a radio. And when you get it tuned just right, you don't even believe what's coming through. You know, so like everyone has their version of that. And I realized that's why some people, you talk to someone who's creative, like they're just a guitarist. And you say, have you ever thought of painting? Oh no, I think I'm just a guitarist. It's like they could literally jump from each job and do it really well because they already know how to be creative. And that's the main thing. That's 90% of all those jobs is creative problem solving. And that's 90% of life, creative problem solving. You've got to figure a very creative way out of the hole you're in.
I want to just pause on that for a moment because something I've admired watching to the extent that I've been able to peer into your process is that you are inviting creativity into your life. You know, we all know you as a filmmaker, as a director, as a producer, as a writer. You know, you just were mentioning, but you are a painter. You're a guitar player. You brought these incredible instruments here. You play the guitar. We ought to talk about those because they're super cool. I think you've even brought paint onto the set and asked your actors to paint as well. So you just a moment ago, you're talking about creativity being in all of these places, but this is something you've actually invited into your life, kind of fully and on lots of different medium.
Yeah, I'll tell you what my main philosophy is. I'll tell you how we kind of get there. There was a friend of mine who is a painter. Yeah, so I like doing this to my guitars. Like, that's an old guitar I've had since 2000 and didn't look like a 25-year-old guitar. So I had a movie job done on it. Now it looks like it pulled it out of a fire. Now it looks like it's 25 years old.
At least.
This one, a friend of mine, actually a flamenco guy who started making his own guitars. I mean, he's incredible with Dremel tools and stuff. Just gorgeous. Huge. I mean, the inlays on that. I wanted to learn painting more. And there's a German painter that I've always liked. I thought, I'm going to go, he gives a 1-week seminar. I'm going to go fly out there and do it. It was about 2012. And I went and did it. Before I went, though, I practiced. I was like, God, I just looks like crap. You know, I think this guy probably has a technique. I should go see what his technique is, what brushes he uses, what paints. It can't possibly be this paint that I'm using. He's not using any kind of medium. I know that. And I always use mediums to kind of fix my mistakes. He's doing it straight to canvas. I don't know how he's doing that. There's something I need to learn before I'm going to be able to do a good job. That's what most people think. Like they need a knowledge. They need a class. They don't have it within them yet. I flew out, saw him painting. He doesn't teach you anything. He's just painting. And then he's like doing a Mick Jagger, really detailed and going into the, cheek first. And I'm like, why are you starting on the cheek? It was different each time. What paints do you using? I looked at them, they're like regular acrylic paint. What brushes do you have? Same brushes. And I'm thinking, how come mine doesn't look like that? So I went back and I went, I'm going to try and do kind of what he's doing. Start with a mid-tone and go. Now that I just see that he didn't have any tricks, it came out. People were coming around going, wow, did you just do that?
Wow.
And so I said, yeah, but it's still cartoony and he's more realistic. And I always do just cartoony stuff because I was a cartoonist, but I'm going to try and do a more realistic version like he's doing. And I did it. I'll show you the picture later. I was everyone's stunned when they see it. I dropped the paintbrush. I didn't paint anymore after that. I didn't need to. Wow. I had learned what I need to learn. I'm going to take this to the set, teach my actors this, and teach my actors painting on the set. Again, to free them up, but also to teach them. People always say you have to know what you're doing. Or knowing's half the battle. What's the other half? not knowing. I think not knowing is as important, if not more important than knowing, because that's where the magic is. You're going to come to the set. You're not going to know completely how you're going to play this character.
Wow.
But it's going to fall in our lap because we're showing up with the intention. We'll start working through the scene and I'm going to point it out when it does. This magic that just kind of appears because we're there with that intention. It does every time. It's like that part you don't know. You don't know how it's going to come out, but you pick up the brush and it's just going to go there. So I teach that to my actors. And it's why I just thought, like you said, you just rattled off a bunch of the jobs I do. I think it was that same year I had to go give a Promax speech or something to a bunch of business people, but creativity always applies to that because they're entrepreneurs. And they introduced me. Robert Rodriguez, he's a writer, director, producer, goes on and on and on. And I got up there and I went, I feel tired just hearing that. It sounds ridiculous. And I see this book on business I've never read, but I see it all the time when I go through the airport. It's called The One Thing.
Oh, yes.
About doing one thing.
Gary Keller's book.
One thing. And I thought, okay, that book doesn't apply to me because obviously I do 50 things. All my interest I always wanted to keep. Because I started that way, as a kid, I loved painting. I loved photography. I loved writing. I loved editing. I thought about being a cartoonist, but movies would allow me to keep all of my hobbies under one project.
Wow.
So I decided, I would just apply that to my life. And so when I think one thing, I told them, but actually, I think there is one thing that I do. If you actually think about it, there's one thing that I do. I live a creative life. All that is umbrellaed underneath the idea that I'm living a creative life. Because I found I was most productive, most, fulfilled, happiest, and most successful whenever I was being creative. So why not do that day and night, 24/7? Like literally, almost like a meditation.
Yes.
Apply creativity to everything. Like I didn't just show up for the interview. I brought my guitars, let's be creative. Let's bring something that might be, you're applying it to everything. You get a business call. You apply creativity to that. How you make breakfast for your kids in the morning. You get creative with that.
Wow.
You can apply creativity all through your life if you just with real intention do it. That way when you do get to write your novel at night or whatever, you're not blocked because you've been creativity has been the furthest thing from your mind.
Extraordinary.
You'll be happier and more fulfilled. And I've just found everyone around you is happier and more fulfilled because creativity coming from you, which isn't really you. Remember, you're the conduit. It's coming through you, is affecting all of them. You're allowing that creative spirit to touch them too.
Absolutely.
And it changes your world. And everyone is just so up all the time because they're going to be getting some boost of creativity.
Wow.
And it's not because it's because you're the instrument. I mean, you're the passage, you're the pipe, you're the conduit. And if you're really open, everyone else benefits because it feeds everyone. If you're really like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know how I'm going to do it again. Well, nobody gets fed, not even you.
Yes. And it's infectious. However, whatever state you're in is going to bleed to the space around you.
Your magic gets out.
I was really struck by the not knowing.
Yeah.
Not knowing
is good.
Is one of those, it's the human condition, right? We are in a moment at all times where we don't know what the next moment holds.
And if you're going to let that block you, but if you let that fuel you, like, well, I know I'm always going to not know so many things.
Yes.
I can't wait to find out what the other answers are. You fear forward is what I said. If someone says they have fear, say fear forward. Wow. Know you have the fear, recognize it. You can't change that feeling, but don't retreat. Sometimes people feel failure a lot.
Yeah.
And I found time and again, my biggest successes came from my failures. Sometimes the only way across the river is to slip on the first two rocks. That's actually the path because there is no path. You're doing uncharted territory. But doesn't mean you made a wrong move if you move on instinct. I had this one, I was giving this one talk like this. And I remember this one woman raised her hand and said, well, you're real positive. But what do I tell myself when I just spent a year and a half working on something that didn't work? That's a really negative way to ask that question. Can you rephrase it first before I can even wrap my head around it? And she said, I learned a good lesson the hard way. And I went, that still sucks. And I go, you've got to look at these things differently. Have you followed your instinct to do that? Like someone didn't say, hey, there's a money-making scheme, go that way. Like you actually had your own instinct to go that way. It's right. Now, the thing might have failed, but that doesn't mean your instinct was wrong. And so I'll give you an example. I'll show you how two of my biggest movies came from my biggest failure. I was working with Quentin Tarantino on Dusk Till Dawn, and he said, hey, I want to do this anthology movie, like multiple stories called Four Rooms. You'll be one of the directors. This is the thing. Four different filmmakers. We're not going to know what each other's writing. It's got to be New Year's Eve. You got to use the bellhop, and you got to stay in your room. But you have a room in the hotel, and you got to use the bellhop on New Year's Eve. So I was like, all right. My hand went up. So I asked the audience. I said, now, instinctually, my hand just went up. Should I have been a little more studied? You know, like they say, balance intellect with intuition. Go do a little research first, and then if I had done even just a smidge of research, I would have seen that anthologies always bomb. They always do terrible, even when it's Martin Scorsese and Woody Allen and Coppola doing something together. New York Stories bombs. Nobody goes to see those. They can't wrap their head around it. What is this, Twilight Zone? You know? But no, I didn't do that research. Now I asked the audience, now, should I have gone on instinct or should I have done some studying first? Because that movie did bomb. They don't know what to say. No one raises their hand, of course, because nobody knows. It's the part that you don't know that's important. Right. So I said, well, I'm gonna say instinct's more important. I did the movie. It bombed terribly, made no money. But when I go back and look at that, examine that failure, I think, well, why did I sign up for that movie? It wasn't to go make a bunch of money. It was to go do some creative exercise with my friends. So really, what was my intention? Let me go sift through the ashes of that failure. And I bet you I'll find at least one key to my next success. When I was on that set, because it's New Year's Eve, I just worked with Antonio Banderas in Desperado, and there's a little boy in that movie. So I saw the little boy's younger brother, who was like only 6. So I hired him to be Antonio's son, because I wanted it to be about two little kids, like my short films. They were kind of this is a precursor to Spy Kids. The best little actress I found was a little half Asian girl. So I got an Asian wife. So they're all dressed to the nines because it's New Year's, even the kids, because that was the requirement given to me. And I see Antonio and this Asian wife, and I'm like, wow, they look like a really cool, sexy, international spy couple. What if these two kids who are dressed like James Bond because it's New Year's? What if these two kids didn't know that parents were spies? Parents get caught. These two kids who could barely tie their shoes have to go save them. There's 5 of those now called Spy Kids. 5 Spy Kids movies spawned from that. Wow. That's one. Second one, I really love making short films. That's why I signed on too, because I love short films. Now, the other directors hadn't made a short film before, so the movie overall was a little wacky and off balance. But my story was really, really fun and very tight and very concise because I had just practiced it a lot. So I thought, I want to make an anthology movie again. I think I can make it work this time. 1 director, 3 stories, like Quentin did with Pulp Fiction. 3 stories instead of 4. And why on earth would I do another anthology if I know they always bomb? Because I just did one and I saw how we could do it better. That's Sin City. So Sin City and Spy Kids directly came from the ashes of that failure. So I told the gal, go back and look at your failure and sift through the ashes of it because you were on the right path. It didn't mean you're going to win. It means you might slip on the first few rocks before you get over to the other side. But if you sit there lamenting and oh, woe is me, I can't get anywhere. Right.
So there's an element of trust.
There's a trust in the process. I like to say. Trust in the process. We might not get all the answers right now, but it's because it wants us to go there. And you're only going to go there when this doesn't work. So just trust in the process. Just keep doing the process and you'll figure it out.
What about inspiration? Is inspiration part of this equation as well? Or what inspires you?
Sometimes I'll get an idea and it's almost like that thing with a drawing when I was drawing a strip. You might have one idea, you draw it here, and then you might have another idea over here that kind of go together, and that will set you off. One of the script I think I was telling you that I wrote came from that. I had, what if I had this? And I wrote down one sentence, and then someone else told me something later on that reminded me of it, and I went back, and I just started writing this whole thing. Wow. And it kind of all comes together. But you don't want to wait for that. Again, you don't want to wait for inspiration. Sometimes it'll just strike. But if you wait for that, waiting for lightning. You can make it strike if you just do the discipline. Like, I'm going to make myself just write. I'm going to make myself just draw. I'm going to make myself pick up the pen. I'm going to make myself pick up the guitar and just start writing music. Anytime you do that, you go back and you listen to the tape and you're like, oh my God, there's some great pieces in here. They didn't feel like that when I was doing it. So you just have to do the discipline. So it's like discipline first, motivation follows. Yes. Because as you're doing it, you'll get inspired as you're working, because what's happening? you're picking up the pen, inspiration starts coming through, the muse starts joining you, the creative spirit starts taking over, you start getting some flow. That's how you have to do it. Action before, it sounds bonkers, but it's what's worked. Action first, inspiration second.
Fascinating.
Some people wait for that inspiration, I've yet to figure out a way to just make it spark on its own other than doing it. It's not going to just happen sitting there. I mean, I've been trying that since I was 19, trying to make that comic strip appear. It's just not going to happen.
Wow.
You've got to pick up the pen. You've got to do the thing the creative spirit doesn't have. And that usually involves your hands or your mind or, something that your movement, something that gives them a body to work with.
You're talking about making yourself do it and discipline. But I think for somebody listening to this conversation who's thinking maybe they'd like to have some creativity in their lives, maybe they'd like to build that piece into their day-to-day, I feel like there's also a lot of joy in this equation. You were talking about fulfillment. And so I wonder if it's kind of like starting an engine. And once that discipline,
once you get it going, once you've been given permission to apply it to everything, you're off. You're just going to have the best life. I think you have the best life.
Wow.
Because everyone gets affected by it. Everyone lives like that around you. And you just have the best life. Everything is always an opportunity to apply creativity, even bad news, good news, bad news. It's like, okay, how can we creatively come up with a solution that's better than anything we ever would have thought of before? That's why I make my kids work on my movies, because that's day in and day out. That's how I got them interested. I made them work on a movie once, and I thought, they're going to hate this.
Yes.
And they came instead so inspired. They went, wow, actor didn't show up. The location didn't match the script at all. We asked you what we were going to do, and you said, I don't know, we'll figure it out. We thought, even my dad stumped. We're afraid.
Wow.
At the end of the day, we figured it out. I went, they don't realize this is every day. And that's every day in life too.
Yeah.
But it's like such a microcosm of your life is making a project. So if you want to get more creativity in your life, just own it and just go, I'm going to, almost like as a mantra, just say with intention, anything that you're doing throughout the day, I'm using creativity this. Even if it's a little tweak there or that, you'll just get in the habit of just always applying it. And you'll feel much better because you're constantly letting that spirit in. And it's going to just enrich everything.
This even applies to the culinary arts.
Totally. I'm cooking all the time. I'm always cooking very creatively. My daughter yesterday, we were like, hey, let's try this. Let's try the pea protein in a bolognese. And let's try this. And we're like, hey, this is great. You're being very creative all the time. She's a drawer. She knows creativity in the kitchen. I figured that out when I would be editing, working on a movie, and then it would be time to eat. Oh, I'll go make something creative in the kitchen. It keeps me in a flow. And I was like, art you can eat. That was more like 30 years ago that I figured out that. I hadn't figured out how to apply it all through my life till later when I just went, you know what? I'm just never going to find more happiness than being creative. So I'm just going to do that 24/7. And it's been just amazing. Wow. I was blessed that I kept having deadlines. A lot of people don't have self-imposed deadlines for their creativity. I was really lucky. Like when I was doing the comic strip, I had to turn that in every day at 6 p.m. Otherwise, I never would have done 200 strips in 2 years. That never would have happened on its own. But because I needed that paycheck, I had to do a drawing a day each week for 5 days each week. When I got into making movies, I was blessed with this idea that, when I was writing a movie, it's always the hardest when you start from the beginning because there's nothing. But then you're shooting it, then you're editing it. And when you're done, you're just exhausted and you just want to take a year off. But I was very lucky in that when you start getting, because I'm doing all those jobs, after you're done writing, you're shooting, then you're editing, you're doing the score. When I'm doing the music and I'm doing the editing, so much creativity is flying around. It's like you're in a creative tornado.
Wow.
You come up with the next 2 movies while you're in there because you're just like going. And I already would sell it to the studio. Hey, I got a movie that we can start shooting a few months after I finish this one. I'll be ready. Start hiring the crew and all this. They liked the idea. They started going. And then sure enough, as soon as I get out of the tornado, the movie's done. I'm dead tired. Wow. I really need a year off. But I've already sold it. And
you don't have a year
they're
off.
like, we need the script. Where's the script? You said it was coming. And then you have to go write it furiously. Again, you got a deadline. And then you're off onto the next one. And it just kept happening. That's why we see in that period of time. Sometimes I was making 2 movies a year. I didn't have all those in advance. They would come tailing after the last one before it because you would then have this pressure of, oh, we need you to give us the scripts because everyone's waiting. So
I love this so much because
those deadlines are great. Having these deadlines, help self-imposing. Call people and say, I've got a script that you're going to love. And I'm going to hand it to you next week. And you're like, fade in. I did that again. This guy called for this script I owe. And I was like, I think it feels a little padded out. So I'm going to go ahead and try and extend it a little bit. I'll give it to you next week. Oh, great. Fade in. I started writing.
Wow.
And I was done. I actually finished.
Extraordinary.
I'm going to turn it into him today.
Congratulations.
Thanks. And I love it. It's like, wow, I thought I just want to get out of this assignment. I want to get out of this assignment. I don't know how to do it. Again, you don't know. See, we have to remind ourselves our own advice. But I had no choice. I had to turn in something. So I went ahead and I just started trying. And then it just wrote itself. And now I love it. Now I'm eager to go reread it again today.
Extraordinary. Wow. Thank you, Robert.
It's not me.
Yeah,
right? Just coming
flowing through.
Yeah.
Those are what huge themes today of just doing it, of getting into the space and in doing it, in trusting yourself, in trusting the process,
trusting the process than anything, because you go, it takes it out of your hands. When I saw the relief my kids had when I told them they didn't have to write it at all, they just had to pick up the pen. Oh, is that all we have to do? It's like, oh, it's that easy? It's like, it actually is. We make it hard for ourselves because we put all these expectations on it. All these expectations and think, now, So
it's so interesting, the dichotomy of that process with the notion of deadlines or the notion of discipline.
Yeah.
It's almost like the soft and the hard. You've got the creative spirits that are the electron. And then you've got the rigor of the discipline that is your nucleus.
Because the deadlines are good. What is the deadline actually doing, though? It's forcing you to pick up the pen or pick up the guitar. It's forcing you to conjure the spirit. Because if you don't have the deadline, you still, even if you know the process, you'll be like, oh, I'm still thinking about it or whatever. It's not going to move the needle. They're not going to, and they're refusing to help you. So you get up off your ass. I'm not going to just lift you up and make you go do things. I'm not going to go, no, you've got to help me out. I need a body.
Extraordinary. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
I think we have said what needed to be said today. I've learned so much. I'm fired up. And I think it's time to go do something creative.
Let's go do creative steps. Go live the rest of our creative day and keep living a creative life.
Well, thank you.
Sure.